Welcome, Hannah. Welcome to our video guests. So yeah, one of the common pitfalls is over engineering, and the solution to that is moving in iterative loops. And it's not like random iterations. The way that we structure the iterations is you start by having some kind of conversation about which direction are we heading. Nati's got a great process she calls "How do we want to be together?" So you have a conversation about like what are some of the principles about how we want to treat each other. What's our relationships going to look like? What kind of values are we trying to embed into our ways of treating each other? How do we want to be together? So that sort of like sets you off in the right direction. And then the iterative process is about regularly stopping and looking backwards and reflecting and talking together. How's it going? What's the delta? What's the gap between the way we said we wanted to be and the way that we actually are being? And the idea is to embed this habit of a culture of talking about what's not working, which in many contexts is like countercultural, especially to talk about what's not working in a constructive way. To say, these are my needs, or these are my expectations, or these are my values that we're not living up to, or like these are the ways that we've fallen short. And here's my suggestions about what we can do. And if you can initiate that culture where these kind of small frustrations get named early and they're approached in a constructive way where we're making small adjustments, we use that to drive the evolution of an organization or a team structure. It's like a regular learning process of like, oh, there's some kind of tension. Let's get to it early so it doesn't build up and become this like catastrophic conflict situation. It's just like, oh, there's this little thing. This meeting felt really inefficient, or the way that we did that decision left people out, or let's just talk about it quickly, and find ways of iterating towards the place that we want to get to.
Yep.
So other stuff that you would add to like what's the like essential place to start?
Probably a lot of things. I think like there's a piece though here that maybe is related because there's another question about how do we deal with the lack of performance or toxic people when there's no authority to kick them out. And I think that sometimes could be one of the pitfalls. It's either that you over-engineer, a little like what Rich was saying, or that you didn't think at all about what could happen and what are the basic minimum agreements that you need to put in place. So I think like one of those minimal agreements is the how do we want to be together, and that includes what are the boundaries too. What happens when someone crosses those boundaries? What happens when someone is not is it's not showing up in the way that we said, or is not performing in the way that we said, and how do we have those conversations? And yeah, like normally what we have is like a conflict resolution protocol. There, like there's several steps that you go through when things are not working well. You have conversations, and then eventually, if that person is still not performing how they should, or not showing up how they should, then there's a team decision to make and a team conversation to have with them.
I think there's something about not even getting to the conflict point, which for me is about having kind of porous boundaries in the organization. So that's, I guess, one of the paradigm shifts that we're pointing towards is like, instead of organizations being these very tightly controlled and siloed, set apart things, it's more like we're networks of collaborators and we have these overlapping relationships. And so the way that people come into our organization is by doing a very small collaboration. It's like, can we do a half of a day, do a half day workshop together, some kind of small thing, and test out how does it work together. And if that goes well, then you're invited to the next date. The kind of the intensity of the relationship might escalate one step, and you're gradually getting closer and closer to becoming a member. And by the time you kind of cross that threshold or cross that membrane into the organization proper, we've already filtered out the people who are not a good fit, or like are not really showing up with aligned values, or they're not really there to serve the purpose. They're doing something else. So that's the ideal case, I guess, is that you have curated the right people into the system by doing these like gradually escalating, and that means you need to have some kind of sense of like being clear about where the responsibility and the authority and the commitment is. Like, not, you were sort of pointing to like when it's completely vague and fuzzy and no one knows what's expected of them, but like having some kind of clear, this is an inner circle and you're approaching it gradually, and at some point we may invite you into it.
Okay, that's a little bit.
Should we talk about more pitfalls, the common pitfalls?
Yeah, you have some things in mind.
um I think one that I recognize a lot, especially from my more online friends, is what I would just typify as like head, not hands. So that's like um very elaborate theories and abstractions, and like have read all the books and gone to all of the cool trainings, and like really excited about this next paradigm, meta modern teal, that got all the cool language, but lacking in the practical implementation details. And the issue with that, and it's good to be resourced by theory and to be inspired by social movements, and to like, yeah, take that inspiration. But the issue with it is, for people that you're trying to recruit into participating with you and creating something, it can be really confusing. Like, what are you talking about? Do I have to like upgrade my whole mental operating system before I can show up here? Or like, what are we doing? Like, what's the practical implementation details? So I'm thinking about, okay, you've got this image of like a next paradigm way of organizing, but what does that mean for how our meetings run? And what does that mean for like how our, like, if we're going to have a conference, how is that conference different? Or like, if there's a decision to be made, what impact does that have on the decision making process? And so like focusing on these really concrete, we're doing an action, and because we're acting in this new paradigm, it feels different. I think that's a much more convincing way to enroll people, just by showing them rather than telling them. And when you get lost in the abstraction, it's easy to like, yeah, people get lost, or they're like having lots of things to disagree with. There's lots of opportunities for like arguments and conflict, and like I don't really get it.
I guess that ties a little bit to these questions about how have you supported people to get on board with self-direction in small teams. It was already on the board. I don't know if that was from any of you folks here. Is there any of you that put that one up? Maybe not. Maybe it was someone else. But yes, it's a little bit of that. And I think like the question, the way I was reading it, at least, it was, how do we support people when we made a decision that we're going to have, that we're going to organize in this different way? How do we support them to buy into the idea and to get into actually living it? And I think that the key word there is support as well. It's not just about, okay, how does it actually look like when we put it into practice? What would it mean if we do this for the way in which we organize? How are things going to change? But also, working in these ways needs kind of a different mindsets and different skill sets as well, and is about supporting people to understand what will be required of them if they move into these ways of organizing, in which ways they're going to have to change themselves. Where are they now? And supporting each other as a group as well, to be like, okay, if we want to work in this other way, and we have made some agreements about what our culture will look like, what are the things, what are the patterns that we have, either the behaviors or the skills or the ways in which we show up to the team, that we need to change, and how can we help each other in that process of learning and changing? And that points a little bit to this other question too, about the type of person who's more open to this stuff. Or is it context specific? And I think like it's both. I don't think there is a type of person per se, but it's a particular mindset, or it's a particular way of being that will be more suited right away to do this. So people that have more of a growth mindset, that are more open to seeing everything as opportunities to learn, that are more inclined to always be seeking to learning new skills and keep developing themselves. People that are that have already higher levels of self-awareness and self-responsibility, they'll thrive faster or easily in those spaces right away. People that can sit with uncertainty, and without freaking out too much, that don't need to always be checking with someone else, or that don't need to have someone else telling them what to do. So they're more self-directed already. But all those things can be learned. That's my belief, at least. All those things are things that one can incorporate and learn and lean into. So it's also about having the context that allows for the spaces to learn, and to that allows for people that are not there yet to still feel that they belong and that they have a space and that they have the support that they need. It's a really tricky one.
I thought, Tim, was that your question about the type of person? Can I hear a little bit
Oh,
more?
we know you so well.
Would you mind saying a little bit more about what's behind that question?
Yeah, I guess I feel like I attempt to bring in self-organizing practices, not the whole system, into wherever I am, and I guess I often feel resistance, and I'm not sure if it's resistance from a type of person. So some people are like, I'm a bit of a systematizer, and I kind of love it, but I see that some systematizers can sort of reject it outright. Yeah, I guess I was wondering if in your experience there is a type, or as long as the context is okay, people will tend to get on board.
Yeah. It's a complex one. Sometimes the way I think about this is, sometimes people ask, why do we do the work that we do? And at the start, I think I had kind of an ideological commitment to non-hierarchy, essentially, like I had some major complaints about the way that power and authority works, and I don't think we should do that. But then over time, as I kind of matured, it's more about it's not so much of an ideological commitment as it seems that there are certain people that wake up one day with this commitment to collaboration, to inclusion, to earnestness, to like living a meaningful life, to like living with your heart open, to like there's a kind of like a whole cluster of values that some people have, and it's not necessarily that that's the right way of doing things or a better way of doing things. It's just that there's a bunch of us that feel that way for some reason. And if you're that type of person, then I think you need structures that support your values. You need like ways of working that reflect your values back at you to stay in integrity. And so I guess I've never really thought about it this way, but I think I am under the assumption that there is a type of person, or is there's a subculture, or it's almost like maybe there's a paradigm shift, or it's a bit like oil and water, like there's different cultures which don't actually blend very well. And maybe you're one of these people that's spending a lot of time in the oily side, and you're a water person, and you're facing up against people that have got just a different cluster of values that are trying to, where it just doesn't make sense to them.
I have a slightly different opinion.
Great.
As usual. I think there's multiple things on what you were saying. One thing is about bringing change to people instead of change being pushed from people. So telling to people, hey, you should be organizing in a different way, without them understanding what is the issue with the way they're organizing right now, or without them feeling the urge or the need to move. That's a little bit what you're saying, is something that is more aligned to their values. So I wonder as well if there's a space to just open up the conversation, like in which ways you will love to be organized, like what would it feel good to you in the way you work. And it also could be that people never had an experience of something different, right? If they always worked in very traditional spaces and ways, things are a certain way. And some people, like I was saying before, if they have, change can be really challenging, and change can be scary. So it's about and coercive. It could be so many things, right? So it's like having those conversations and maybe showing, you're naming this earlier, showing in smaller ways what could a different team environment and a different way of working what it could actually look like, what it could feel like. There could be some really small experiments that don't feel that scary, or that like everything is going to change. What's going to happen with my job? What is going to happen to me? What are the ways in which I have to change to do this if I'm not really on board? So it's like, taking it a bit slower with people that have more resistance, and understanding what is the resistance there for. It has a reason, right? So it's understanding and going a bit deeper.
I wanted to add I just thought about this question about where should you start. I actually think there's a preceding thing about where you start, which is before you even initiate a new project or a new team or something like that. I think it's essential that you have you have your own regular connection to a place of practice, like that you know in your bones what it feels like to organize in this way. And when you're starting out, you won't be really confident about how to create that, but those spaces do exist that you can jump into. So like, we're running these community calls every month. There's the Micro Solidarity Network. There's loads of networks online that are starting up where you can actually get a taste of like, what is it like to show up in a different way, to participate in a different way, and having that like embodied touch point with this different paradigm, I think is like essential for your own calibration, like knowing what you're trying to bring to people.
There's a lot more questions, and not sure if we'll get through all of them, but there is something here about how to form nourishing and purposeful circles within existing hierarchical structures, or purely de novo. And I wonder who put that one up. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the context. Was that any of you folks?
Could have been Victor, who's currently on the phone.
Could have been Victor that is currently on the phone. That's probably fine. So I think like that kind of, yeah, if it is about how do we start some of these inside hierarchies, so how do we start testing things inside hierarchies, kind of relates a little bit to that, yeah, in general. So it's another way of starting, right? If you're already in a traditional space and you want to bring these ideas, where do you go? And we actually support people with this in those kind of organizations. And it's about finding a team that already has like a good cohesion, and that it has a desire to practice things. And it also has a mandate from the rest of the organization to try some of these new ways of working. So you can start with bringing some really simple practices, like just running retrospectives for a couple of months, where actually people get encouraged and heard when they bring new things and things that are not working well. And that they, from that space of the retrospective, that maybe for those of you that don't know what a retrospective is, I should clarify, it's basically a meeting where you look at how have you been working together, and you think about what has been working well, what hasn't been working so well. And after you have those conversations, you can choose a few of those things that are not working so well, to think together, how are you going to improve them? How are you going to change? What are new things that you can try out? What are changes that you're going to do? And it's about your ways of working. So that's a really good place to start. And then the whole team, or that smaller circle, can start practicing these new ways of bringing some ideas, testing some things, stopping again, reflecting again, bringing some more ideas, and so on. Rich was naming it already, but yeah.
I saw the question about the board moving in,
Yes.
and I want to know whose question that is. And can you tell me a little bit more about the situation you're looking at? Yeah, great. Thanks for that context. It's really helpful to illustrate the picture.
Yeah.
Boards move slowly. That's by design, right? Like that's the job of a board, is to be the kind of ballast in an organization where everything else is going really quickly. The board is supposed to be this like, oh, let's chill. So I would suggest that sometimes you can do a revolutionary moment, but I would propose that like more likely the way to shift a board is to make gentle sustained pressure over a long time. And that means, I think, and I'm saying this because I've witnessed it from another agile coach who inspired me a lot, Mary O'Keefe down in Wellington.
Oh yeah.
I've seen how she works, which is basically make a diagnosis of what you think is happening. And that means doing a lot of one-on-one, getting to know people and understanding their perspective, and really building that map for yourself about who are these people, what makes them tick, what are their resistance, what are their visions, what are their desires, what's an integrity for them, et cetera, and formulate some sense of like where you think you could get them to that would be tolerable for them, and then hold that posture consistently over multiple years. And anytime you see an opportunity, it's like, let's take one step and one step and one step. And it's that consistency that has the big impact. As you're talking about bringing new people into the board, that's a really great opportunity, because you get a chance to like enculturate them and say, hey, this is how we do things around here. And wait a minute, how do we do things around here? And maybe are they fit for purpose? Do we want to try some new things? What comes to mind for me is like having a great retreat if you can possibly get the time. Like if you can get people outside of their usual habits and norms of meeting into a new space and put some special time aside, you can call forth some different behaviors from people, and you'll see parts of them that they're not used to showing each other, and that might be a chance to like initiate the self-improving loop.
Boards are a
Thanks a
very
million.
thing.
Aye.
We work with
Right.
a lot of NGOs and a lot of teams that are struggling with this because they want to organize more decent, like more decentralized or more flat, and but their board is the one that is resisting most of the change, and the board is not working in that way. So there is something here that I think that the field will slowly move more into understanding how to help boards transition as well. There's a really good video from Frederic Laloux,
I can find it.
by the way, on teal boards and what does it mean to be a board.
Ah.
I know there was a couple
another one?
more questions there, but I wonder if there's something else that as we're speaking here, if there's something else bubbling up for people in this room, and we can hear your voices as well. Or maybe not. That's fine as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like I live in a world like a lot of this stuff is so sensible, but I'm working in one of the organizations I'm working with where we got elected, and they just a council got elected of people who'd never worked together, and for a 6-month period, like it's a very limited period, and we have to produce and so like a lot of these things make sense, but we spent about 2 months just trying to set up the rhythms and everything, but like the logic, I don't know how parliaments ever worked. You know, let's elect 100 people and see how it goes. It's even with, we've done really well, but even with the council, we were, like just 3 people randomly elected together, and it was pretty crazy to deal with some of all the things you're saying make sense. I'm like, yeah, but.
I hear you. Yeah. No one said that this was easy. Trying to organize in this way is definitely not easy. It might be more fulfilling and rewarding if you're inclined in that way. There's definitely not.
But I guess we should come with a warning that there is a high degree of overlap between people who spend time with us and people who quit their organizations. Which is a joke, but it's also serious to say that there's a certain amount you can push, and then there's a point where it's like, I'm the momentum is going in a different direction than you know.
And there is this question here about how to integrate new pattern structures and practices in a context where deadlines and urgency get prioritized over cultural change effort.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who brought that question. I'm assuming it's one of you folks.
Jocelyn,
Jocelyn, do you want to tell us more about what you meant or the context?
Sure. I mean, in the organizations that I've helped so far, that seems to be a very common question. And I was just curious to have like a little bit more space for chewing on it around like so many people say, oh, like we introduced the idea of pods and crewing, and then the idea of meeting for 1 hour a week every 2 weeks, 6 times. Some people are like, oh my God, we don't have time for that. And I'm just like, okay, well, that's like the bare minimum, like one basic bare minimum idea that you could use to integrate a cultural change from a retreat or a workshop, for example, after some kind of new idea or insights come into the team. And I just wonder, I'm kind of curious if there are organizations where the management team has like uses their mandate to actually say, if you're going to be employed, like this is what you need to be. This is kind of the expectation, that it kind of becomes part of like the board itself also has to be part of doing that. And I think that helps a lot actually, where if the board was role modeling that we're actually valuing cultural change. And still, I just imagine so many communities or organizations struggle with this like time crunch urgency thing. Yeah.
It's very common, at least with the especially in the NGO world that we've been working with, because NGO are normally over capacity. So they're doing way too many things. They don't have enough people. They don't have enough money. So always feels like the work that they're doing, because it's so purposeful as well, and it's their mission in the world, it feels like that work is more important. So we should put aside, and I guess it's a little stereotype of an activist that I'm going to do right now, but I have seen this type of person that the world in the world is more important than my needs. My needs are second or third or last. So our cultural needs or the way in which we organize, that's not important. We should spend most of our time in the world, in the work we're doing in the world. So it's more about like slowing down and having that conversation, right? Like that's going deeper and be like, what's going on here? Why do you feel like you don't have the time or the capacity to work on this, while working on this will probably make you more effective in the world in the long run, right? So it's about setting up the space. You're going to hear me a lot to say, you need to talk about it. That's basically my recipe for this kind of work.
Yeah. Let me give some suggestions about what to talk about.
Yes.
If priorities are changing, that to me is it's like, it's basically a symptom of a lack of accountability somewhere in the system. Like if you collectively said, or if the people in charge said this is our priority, and then it gets overrun by the things, it's like, well, where's the accountability? There needs to be some kind of checks and balances to say, hey, we said we're doing this and now we're doing that. What's up? I would say that the organizational priorities are obvious. They are where the budget is and where the calendar is. Like, where are people putting their time and money? That's what the organization prioritizes. And if you want to like initiate something new, it's like, okay, well, where is the time and money coming from? Does this mean I can cancel that meeting if you're putting this other meeting on my calendar? Like, there's got to be that kind of crunch moment where you make those trade-off decisions. On the other hand, yes, from our perspective as facilitators, and we love getting groups together, and we know that there's a 6-week program of getting people into these small peer support groups is going to do wonders for the culture, etc. But 6 meetings is kind of a lot, you know. And so as someone who's like trying to bring a change initiative, I think being really responsive to what's easy for people to say yes to, and where are the easy wins, and the like, how do you get something going and then build it step by step by step, and be really patient, like I was saying about the consistent thing to Mark as well. Like we've done a lot of groups where they got very excited and then they committed to a 6-week program, and then halfway through, you know, that they'd lost
Something else happened, and
yeah.
Definitely though, if there is a leadership team or a management team, and they are the ones setting the priorities and setting the calendar, for them to put things like, okay, this is the time every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or whatever it fits, where we prioritize our culture in whichever form that looks like. Now, if they are also the ones that later on will scratch that meeting for something else, then that's a problem. That's a bigger problem, because then you have the leader saying one thing but then showing another. So those are things to pay attention to, I think, as a coach as well. Yeah. Any other questions that are coming through? I'm trying to read things. Oh, there's one here about live versus Zoom training. And I wondered if it was from any of you folks.
Yeah, that was from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say more.
Yeah.
I needed to understand if you were meaning that like online trainings are better, or that in-person trainings are better.
In person are better. I've been having a real problem with, like, I really do not want to facilitate a workshop for project management. Like, we were exchanging tweets on that, but I can't find anything that is in person anymore. And all the things that I used to recommend to people, and my co-founder and I, he was very open. Then he did one of the a workshop, a live training workshop that I had suggested to him, which was a condition for merging our organizations. This is not the one I got elected to. It's another one. And everything else that I used to recommend to people for skilling up is online. And I'm looking at the graduate students program. I'm just reserving my judgment about whether online is bad or not. Looking at the actual graduates of courses that I did in person and looking at the online graduates, it's just like the quality isn't good. And I'm feeling pushed into like, how am I gonna get these people trained up if I don't do it's a really big issue for a variety of reasons. And I'm talking more about long-term project management where people are doing their shadow work and they're doing, as well as doing that team work, but also being accountable to one another and having a buddy system and like that whole system in place, but meeting in person every so often. I just don't know how to match that online, and I'm feeling really frustrated about that. Like, so frustrated that I might actually do it. I don't have
I think
time.
you got your own answer. Yeah. I agree. I think like, you know, each space, online space and in-person spaces have a different different positive and different positive aspects and different challenges, right? And I think it's more about maybe thinking about what is really good about the in-person spaces and how you can bring at least some of that online. That could be the best option if you're going to create one. And I'm really happy to jump with you as well on a call and jam on these, Grace, at any point if you want to create your own. But yeah, I mean, personally, I prefer in-person things, but it's not always possible. And I think it's the same for teams that are remote, for example, right? When you're remote all the time, like, is it better if you don't meet in person ever? Probably not so good to create a really jammy, like a really trustful, really good culture. But sometimes that's the only possibility. So it's like, well, how can we make sure then that we can create some of the needs that we have that will be fulfilled in person? How can we bring them into this space, into this virtual space? So it's putting more on the design side of things, I guess. Are you answering things on
A little bit. I just did one.
Euro?
There was
Yeah.
one about micro solidarity, so I just quickly threw a couple of comments.
Yeah. There's a lot of interconnection between those different models, for sure. We're actually, FYI, you all, we're creating a free self-paced course on like the really basics of self-organizing. So some of these pieces will be there, and there's some pieces about the different theories as well, and what do we
Just
pick
the
from them.
overview
So
of the whole landscape.
it's like a little overview. So you'll get access to that fairly soon once we can finish it. Okay, we're almost at time to wrap up. So maybe just to have a little checkout on the chat, if you want to drop like, what is maybe like a tiny insight that you're living with today? Or is one thing that you heard that it was a little aha, or even if it's like an extra question that showed up, although we didn't manage to cover all your questions. Hopefully we'll have more of these conversations in the future too.
And if you're driving and you can't type, you can also unmute and tell us what's on your mind.
For
But
all
don't-
of
just don't
those of
crash.
you that are driving, yes.
Are we typing in the chat or in the
Yeah,
Miro?
you can drop them in the chat. If that's easier, yeah, go for it. You can also unmute and share out loud if you want. Great. Scale and rhythm is basically an answer to everything. Yep.
Yep.
I got pretty much.
Yeah.
And open communication, but yeah. Find a smaller group. Yep. Work within the willing. That's right. Test things out. So one thing that I didn't say with that, we actually tried this in a few very large organizations. And the idea was they'll start trying things and then they'll start pollinating the rest of the organization, sharing what they learned, what's working for them, and supporting other teams in the organization that are interested to start trying it as well. So like it takes some time, but it's like it populates slowly. Yeah. The tension between the type of people in an org and the grace of the invitation to a new way of working. Yes, it's a thin balance. But I believe you can do it, Chris. explicit one pager of things to put in place next time I get elected to something. Yep. That sounds
Yep.
pretty good, Grace.
Yeah.
Integrating retros is a potential starting point. Yes, definitely. Awesome. It's really nice to start seeing so all of this. Yeah. So Rich just dropped a thing there where we have some new courses, some new self-paced short courses. If you want to check them out in some of these topics, especially with rhythms, where we talk a bit there about the different rhythms that we need, the different pulses. And also we're going to be doing more of these calls in different topics as we do. We try to have one a month that is free for our newsletter subscribers. So it's our little community there. So please keep an eye on that, and we can see you again over here. And if you have any questions that are still remaining and you really want an answer, just send us an email. We're always open to chat.
Yeah, maybe we would even take
Where are
suggestions,
you
topics to
now?
focus.
We are in the port of Civitavecchia in Italy, waiting for our ferry that leaves really late tonight towards Barcelona. So that's where we are right now. Thanks, Victor.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, so we do have a really cool course as well coming soon from one of our new collaborators, Line, on cultural synergy. So it's about how to work with differences in our team, difference in culture, in background, but also in
Yeah.
ways of working.
Maybe that's relevant for this thing
So-
about what type of people are
Yeah, the type
well,
of
there's different
people and
kinds
the
of people that can
culture
work together.
and the things and how we can bring them. So check it out. It's on our website. And yeah, we'll love to see you soon. So thanks you all for joining and bearing with us as we rant at you. Nice to see familiar faces and new faces too.
Ciao.